It's funny how quickly a scene of wonder can become a vision of hell. I was alone in the little HOV submersible. It could comfortably hold 3 people or uncomfortably hold 5, but I had gone alone this time. There wasn't any real reason for it, certainly not a good one. I had simply taken a chance to be alone in the depths. I was eager to try a solo expedition. I had expected it to be a serene and meditative experience aside from the occasional crackling of voices over the intercom. I suppose I should have been careful what I wished for. I was hundreds of meters below the surface where little sunlight filtered down to illuminate the waters. I was observing a number of undersea worms inhabiting the slopes of a cliff, taking notes, when the crackling of the intercom abruptly went completely silent and the dim lights within the cockpit went dark. Even the little LEDs next to some of the controls ceased to emit any light. With the lights all out, it was almost completely dark. The limited sunlight that reached from the surface did little to illuminate the interior of the submersible. With the static of the radio going quiet, it was as silent as the grave. It was with grim amusement I considered that may have become an accurate description. "Hello? Anyone up there hearing me?" I pressed the intercom button. Sure enough, there was no response. Nothing. Panic started to set in. I breathed like I was already gasping for air. My heart pumped adrenaline through my veins, unknowing that no amount of adrenaline could help me flee this danger. The shadow the submersible was cloaked in was no longer that of the deep, but of death, and that shadow was getting ever darker. It wasn't just my imagination, though. It was getting darker and darker. Whatever had caused the submersible to malfunction must have also caused its ballast tanks to take on more water. Or maybe it was the other way around. In my mad panic, I couldn't quite put those thoughts together. I simply knew that I was sinking. I was getting further and further from the safety of the surface world. I knew it was eating up my air supply, so I fought in vain to control my breathing. I couldn't get a grip on myself. A primal voice in the back of my head screamed to run, but there was nowhere to go. Outside of the submersible, there was only the deep, inky blue that was steadily becoming black. I considered trying to force my way out of the submersible and swimming for the surface, a desperate and foolish thought. There were some people who could hold their breath for an extremely long time, a boon of their genetics. Even they surely couldn't make the distance I was now at, and I was definitely not one of those endowed with such a gift. Besides, trying to swim up now, I would probably lose consciousness to the bends and drown anyway, assuming the intense pressure of the deep ocean didn't compress me into a fleshy lump first. No, there was no escape. No chance of a risky, foolhardy dash for survival. I was trapped in a world inhospitable to human life, and that world had decided to claim me. I would simply descend lower and lower, slipping beyond the grasp of rescue. The only question was what would happen first. Would my air run out, or would the submersible be crushed like a tin can? Like anything else built on land, it could only take so much pressure before becoming compromised. Desperation and panic gave way to despair. There was no hope for me. I suddenly felt very tired, as in an instant my body stopped trying to fight my fate. It wasn't that I wasn't afraid. It wasn't calm I felt now. It was resignation. There was no amount of struggling that could save me. I would be one more foolish human who stepped out of his domain into that of the ocean, only to be claimed by the watery void and used to feed the creatures it birthed. I wasn't a religious person. I didn't offer any prayers in the hopes of divine intervention, but I thought that if there was a God, that God was the ocean, an entity greater and deeper than we could imagine, an enigma that was beyond our comprehension no matter how much we tried to study it. I was to be the next sacrifice to that vast, unfeeling deity. As those delirious thoughts came unbidden to my mind, I noticed lights, faint but dazzling as they shimmered and glittered in the black water. A beautiful world that so few of us got to visit. A serene, quiet world that was simultaneously barren and teeming with life, gritty and pristine. It was like an out-of-body experience. Resignation finally gave way to acceptance. I could be at peace with this. I would suffocate. The HOV's hull would crush and break, water would eventually seep in, and so too would life eventually make its way inside. The ruined remains of both myself and the submersible would eventually come to settle among the silt of the sea floor. Creatures would feast on what remained and turn the broken shell of the vehicle into a home. I would forever be a part of that beautiful, serene, and alien world. My life returned to whence all life came, particles floating in the abyss, everywhere and nowhere. Perhaps one day the ocean would claim the rest of humanity too, dragging everyone back to their old home, body, and soul.
Hello, and welcome to Stories Across Borders. Here we discuss stories told across a range of different mediums, books, movies, games, you name it. The only rule is that we can only talk about things in terms of the writing. Anything like acting, animation, art, etc., is off limits unless it relates directly to how the story is being told. I'm Daniel Radford, author, Faulty HOV, and also your host, and today I'm joined, as usual, by my typical co host, John Kernan.
Hello, it's dark down here.
Yeah, I just sort of keep him in the abyss. Speaking of, he was also the owner of the voice you just heard reading Blackest Blue, the short story I wrote to wrap up our cycle on the ocean. I felt like there was more to add to that, but there really wasn't, actually.
No, but that's okay, because there wasn't more to add to the story either. Is a nice little package.
Yeah, so let's maybe start by analyzing that package. As we typically do in these episodes, figure we can lead off by I'll go into a little bit about why I wrote this specific story. Uh, and as often is the case, my reasoning for writing this one was less to do with a specific thing I really wanted to do for the cycle, and more to do with what the focus episodes on the Swarm and Along the Sea didn't really do. Which was I wanted to make a point of leaning into the horror of the ocean, and specifically the mundane horror of the ocean, the ordinary, non sci fi, non fantasy, regular ass scariness of the ocean.
Mhm.
Because as wonderful as the Swarm and A Lull on the Sea are, one of them deals is hard sci-fi, and the other one is deep into the fantasy genre. Both of them sort of personified the ocean in the form of a god or this alien intelligence, and used the ocean as a vehicle to explore, or rather used those intelligences as a vehicle to explore the themes present in stories built around the ocean. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted to just make the ocean for the most part.
Yeah, I think you did it pretty well too. It's honestly a nice thing that's always good to see whenever really any any creative trying to create something around the ocean is good at making the ocean just the ocean. Because like, not to bring it up again for nothing, I'm only going to talk about it for 2 seconds, I swear. But a game that's great at making the ocean feel, for the most part, like it's just the ocean, despite literally being an alien world filled with alien creatures, is Subnautica.
I mean, Subnautica as a vibe, I mean, it doesn't intentionally lean into the horror of it as much, but it does a very similar thing where it just embraces the ocean as it is, the good and the bad, just that it is a part of the natural order of the world.
Yeah, it's just like how if you made a game all about spiders that wasn't trying to be horrific or scary or anything at all, a billion people would still be terrified of it because spiders.
Are naturally inherently terrifying to a lot of people, yeah.
Yeah, it's I think it's still the number one phobia on the planet.
It's definitely up there. I don't have it myself, which is probably a good thing living in Australia, but I know a lot of people that do.
Arachnophobia has to be rough in Australia.
I mean, I've been into this before. We don't even actually have that many dangerous spiders.
It's rough here too. America's filled with spiders. It just regionally.
But yeah, the
Yes.
ocean. It's exactly that. Like, it's a wonderful tool for metaphor and for science fiction and for fantasy and for these like otherworldly kind of stories. And it's very easy to gravitate in that direction because of its natural mysteriousness. But I wanted to sort of strip that away and just be like, the ocean just is this. Because I tend to be in the camp that the scariest horror is often the horror that's plausible, right? Like, don't get me wrong, I love ghost stories. We've established this. I love a demonic possession. I love an alien invasion. But I think mundane horror is scarier because it's something that could just happen to anybody. It could happen to you. It possibly is happening to someone at this very moment. And there's something scarier and more foreboding about something real.
Yeah, it it's really scary, and it's great because the mundanity of it all, at least when it comes to well, no, really when it comes to most parts of the ocean, ironically make it that much easier to believe why so many people personify it or at least attach, like, ritualistic importance to it beyond the, as we've said before, unavoidable, unchangeable importance the ocean has just by existing. Like, because even when you just think of the ocean as an environment, the amount of how little control you have over it and how much control it has over you if you dare to step into it really barely feels any different
Yeah.
from being in the hands of an incomprehensible god that can play with you however it wants.
Yeah, I mean, that is the thing. Like, the ocean is something that is very easy to take for granted as a land based species. It's there, we know it's everywhere, and we even know all the different ways it can hurt us. But because for most of us, it's not a constant, active part of our lives, we don't really think about it until it is brought to our attention, either by something bad happening or just by going near it or in it or someone pointing out something to you, reading a story, whatever, until our attention is forcibly drawn to the depths of the terror present in the ocean, we don't really pay it much mind.
Yeah, it's just kinda there at all times in the distance where we're always told that 70% of even just the surface area of the world is still the ocean. But, you know, then we don't really think about it beyond that because wow, that 30% of land we have is still so much, so big land, and we all live on land. Look at the ocean over there being attached to the land instead of the other way around.
Yeah, I mean, even our once again nameless protagonist of the story started out taking the ocean kind of for granted. Even though they are clearly a scientist, it's most likely, it seems, right? They were
Yeah.
like, "Yeah, I just kinda wanna hang out in the ocean depths on my own. That sounds like a really meditative, pleasant experience. I'm gonna take the opportunity that I've got." And very quickly, were reminded that that's not their environment. And that's one of the things that is so scary using the ocean for horror is that it's not our environment. We are not built to survive the ocean. We can go out there in a sub or on a boat or whatever, but once we are out there, what we're doing isn't making it an environment that we can sustainably easily live in like we are doing on land. It is simply patching up a hole, you know? It is making it so we don't immediately die, but we are still very much at the ocean's mercy. Even the biggest, like, most complicated, powerful ships we have are still at the mercy of the ocean when we take them out.
It's such a weird little trip of evolution that we have reason to believe, all life, including us, came from the ocean, obviously, and we still rely on it to this day to live, and yet we have so thoroughly changed, so thoroughly conquered everything that's not the ocean, like survival and evolutionarily speaking, that the place that we see as the origin of all life is simultaneously so alien to us.
Yeah,
It's where we came from and yet so thoroughly not us.
yeah, it's stepping out into the ocean is not that different in a lot of ways from going out into space. It is an environment that is completely hostile to us. It is not a survivable environment without extreme support from technology, and even then, there's no guarantee that that will keep you safe forever.
Yeah, we need the entirety of our technological know-how just to rent a little bit of space in the ocean for a little while, and it's still dangerous.
And I don't think that's ever really going to change, to be honest. We might get better and better and better at it, but ultimately, there's only so much you can do in the face of just incomprehensible amounts of depth and pressure, a total lack of warmth and sunlight, and all of this in the face of the fact that it is an environment we literally cannot breathe in. We have to take little bits of oxygen with us when we go into the ocean.
Yeah, take it with you. It's not you're not gonna be able to grab more of it from the ocean. Maybe if you're if you're closer up to the surface, but not only is everything else going on, but there's less and less oxygen parts per million in the water the further down you go too, I believe.
Maybe I'm not entirely certain of that, but
Either that or just the pressure makes it harder to grab anything from it anyways, because we kind of have tech for grabbing little bits of oxygen out of the water, but it's not efficient.
and that's the thing, like, we talk about it being, like, this hostile alien hospital environment, and that's the truest way to describe it, right? There is we've touched upon this a couple of times, especially in the first 2 episodes of this cycle. It's not like the ocean is just hostile to you in one way. It is hostile to you in every conceivable way.
It's almost worse than hostile to you. It's completely,
Inhospitable,
oh
but
no,
yeah.
the the word disappeared to me. Not even that. The ocean is completely apathetic to you. And as I've said before, apathy is death. But in this case, it's sure not the ocean that's gonna die from that apathy.
You can't breathe down there, you can't survive the pressure, you cannot see, without manufacturing light, and even then, it doesn't pierce very far.
Yeah. Ocean may not be trying to kill you, but it is literally giving you no tools, no opportunities, no windows for survival.
It's also full of even if you were able to, develop a suit that let you get out and actually swim at a decent depth, right? It's still also full of massive creatures who will poison you or eat you or just accidentally steamroll you.
Yeah, who might just passively bump into you, not even notice the slight tiny little impact of you on their skin while you are sent reeling and possibly rupturing whatever suit is allowing you to survive.
Yeah, a jellyfish will kill you without even knowing you were there. They don't have brains. And then, like, even hydrothermal vents, right? These parts of the ocean, these volcanic parts of the ocean deep down that radiate heat and life-giving nutrients. The parts of the depths that are teeming with the most life, even those places are inhospitable to humans because they are really fucking hot and the gases they are constantly spewing out are toxic to us.
Yeah. Imagine being in a nice little plane going for a ride and flying low over a volcano without even seeing the volcano, and also replace the smoke with steamy bubbles that are going to melt your plane.
Do you know what happens when you mix water and sulfur? You get acid.
That's true.
the the
Ooh.
the ocean is just made of ways to kill you, and even at the surface, and the deeper down you go, the worse it gets, and the more alien it gets because there's so much down there we do not know or understand. And you combine that with the fact that it is something we tend to take for granted, right? Like fishermen going out and just on the surface, they're more keenly aware of it than most. But even then, they're kind of like, yeah, this is just we're just going out in the ocean. This is our living. Do you know how many ships have been overturned by sudden rogue waves that were too big for their ships to handle? Neither do I, but the number's a lot.
It's a lot.
It genuinely surprises me that there is not more mundane, non-supernatural horror built around the ocean.
Yeah, for some reason the mundane side of the horror of the ocean mostly exists in like novels and not a lot of like I mean, the ones I've seen at least are popular enough, but they're novels you hear about if you're lucky and someone you know reads one or that you would find at like an airport or something instead of like big blockbusters that everybody's going to hear about. And like, I don't, most of the other mediums just have almost none of it
I
at
mean,
all.
I would say there's a fair few movies, but even then, they're often mostly they take 2 flavors, the majority of them. They're either derived from Jaws, and they're like shark attack movies, basically. And that's not to say they're necessarily bad. I can't remember the title, but there's genuinely a really good one about 2 women who are divers, and they go, like, deep into the ocean and get stuck down there with a bunch of sharks above them as they're slowly running out of oxygen, and that is a great example of that mundane horror, right?
That might be the only example I can think of horror through sharks actually done right.
Other than Jaws, yeah.
Well, I just mean because like Jaws mischaracterizes
I
sharks
mean, it does, but it's still a
and
really
causes a
good
lot of
movie.
problems. But I just mean that one is like, no, yeah, that's unavoidable. No matter how much you acknowledge that for the most part sharks aren't dangerous. They do know that they still sometimes, even just by accident, hurt people. And if you're deep underwater, you can't afford even the damage to your suit, let alone potential damage to your arm or your leg.
Exactly.
And if there's a whole swarm of sharks above you that you would have to swim through to get back to the surface, even if you're not afraid of sharks, that would be terrifying because all it takes is one of those sharks to be inquisitive enough to take a little bite and you're screwed.
Yeah, and honestly, that's one of the I wish I could remember what it is, because that's one of the things I did genuinely really like about that movie, right? Is that, the sharks were the secondary horror, right? They were a threat that enabled the ever-growing realization of the true horror, which was that they were running out of oxygen.
Yeah, the sharks are just a wall.
And of course, the other brand you get is the big disaster movies. The one that really comes to mind very quickly is San Andreas, which is a fun movie. It's not at all a bad disaster movie, but it's not mundane because of the sheer scale we're dealing with when we come to like a super tsunami.
And also, like, you know, the disaster movies, generally, if they're going to include the ocean, it's through a tidal wave. And tidal waves are terrifying and they do come from the ocean. But also, it has that little almost disappointing for me at least aspect of, yeah, but it doesn't feel that much like it's about the ocean also because it's about how does the water threaten us on land. We don't get that alien feeling and also like unless you're in a couple little very unfortunate areas, there's nothing mundane about a tidal wave either.
Yeah, I mean,
I mean, it's normal, it's natural, of course, but
unless you live on the coast as well, like you're not really at great risk from the ocean encroaching on land in a storm surge or a tsunami or whatever. So it doesn't
you're at
feel
risk of being
mundane.
sad that you heard your local beach is destroyed
Yeah.
and you can't go there anymore.
So it doesn't feel mundane. It feels like a spectacle. And this, I wanted to keep it small scale. It's just one guy who is quite literally out of his depth.
Yeah.
I didn't want it to be this grand experience. I wanted him to feel small, but not in the same way that a disaster movie does or a monster shark movie does. I wanted it to be small in the face of a mundane reality. The realization not that something is very grand, but that he's not, and that he is just at the mercy of a very ordinary force in life.
Yeah, and he has to go through the whole cycle of fear, pure and unfiltered, because he's got nothing and nobody but the walls of his tiny sub to bounce off of.
Yeah, I mean, one of the most what something that elevates fear is isolation. Always. Things are scarier when you're alone. Unless the person keeping you company is trying to kill you, I guess. But here he has no support network. It is just him and this unrelenting, apathetic, unfeeling force that is the ocean. There's no one around who can help him. He is powerless, and powerlessness is the other thing that really contributes to horror. And he just kind of has to sit there and wait and probably eventually die and just hope maybe someone comes to rescue him.
Yep, with the knowledge that if nobody does come to rescue him, which it's really really likely that nobody will rescue him, that also equally likely, actually even more likely after he's dead, that nobody will ever find him and know what happened to him beyond that he disappeared into the ocean, and he will simply just be another part of the ecosystem, more than a statistic to those who knew him on land, but even less to the environment, the place he died, and the creatures that find him.
Yeah, very much. And it's interesting because I, whilst I very much didn't want to personify the ocean or anything like that, I wanted to keep it a mundane, believable horror and just lean into that normalcy of it, the fact that it's just it's just the ocean. And this is just what it is. I juxtapose that by having him personify the ocean.
Yeah, because in a way, personifying the ocean almost kind of is a mundane thing. Like it's a fairly natural response for people historically, but also at this point with how much emotional significance a lot of us have attached to the ocean in one way or another.
Yeah, the reason I have him do that, right, is because it highlights how powerless he feels in the face of it. He is personifying the ocean and anthropomorphizing it in a way because it is helping him process and contextualize what is happening to him. And that is a big part of why we as a species do that. We will frequently anthropomorphize things or assign divinity to them and things like that as a way of processing it and helping ourselves find an understanding of something that is otherwise incomprehensible to us.
It's a lot easier for us to feel like we understand something is happening to us as a result of some sort of will, even if it's an alien one, than it is to truly fully accept that it's happening for no reason at all.
Yeah, very, very true. That is definitely a part of it. And of course, the other part of it is by doing this, it's just helping him rationalize and process what is happening to him. It's a smaller scale version of how humanity has dealt with the ocean for centuries.
Yeah, definitely less scary that way.
This is this what he is doing with the ocean in this story is what the Greeks did with Poseidon, the Romans with Neptune. Other people with other sea gods. It's a surprisingly lacking part in my knowledge of mythology, as it turns out. But there are many.
It's something inescapable. Like even when we're not thinking about and personifying the ocean in a way, we're often personifying things that affect it or are because of it anyways. Like, it's another thing people personify a lot? The moon. The moon's got a lot to do with the ocean. But funny enough, even though we know moon, gravity, water, and all that, there's also this weird thing of spiritualism that comes with the connection between the ocean and the moon. And the only reason I can assume, besides the fact that people spiritualize both the moon and the ocean separately, anyways, is that they're so far away. Like on a base surface, not comprehension, not thinking deeper level, the ocean and the moon have nothing to do with each other, except that they do, you know?
Yeah. I mean, it's not. I mean, the ocean, the moon. We just do that. Like, it's just what humanity does. We assign divinity or sentience or will or whatever to things because it brings it to our level in a way by anthropomorphizing. I mean, it's in the name, anthro, which basically means human. I think.
Yeah, we want to feel like we can communicate with or understand or have some effect on everything to the point where kind of even when we consciously accept that we can't, unconsciously our brains like refuse to on a primal level.
Yeah, it's exactly what I was using right when I did this because even though this guy is humanizing the ocean as part of his method of processing what's happening and accepting things and coping with it, as the as to us as the audience who is reading the story that is not humanizing the ocean, it only further highlights the divide, right? It only emphasizes the alienness of it instead of making it easier to comprehend. At least that's what I was going for, and I hope that's what happened.
I'd say so.
But he does do something weird going through this process of like humanizing the ocean and things like that, and that he goes full circle by the end of the story in a lot of ways, or in a way he almost never stops appreciating the ocean either.
That's true. He's not ignorant to the ocean or blasé about it and its pun intended depth. He's just going through his own little cycle of fear and everything about his own situation. His estimation about the ocean never really changes. Just the feelings he's experiencing in it and about it moment to moment.
Even as the ocean is actively killing him, or rather passively killing him, because of course there's no will involved, so it is a passive thing. But even as this is happening, once he has processed his powerlessness and accepted that there's nothing he can really do about this situation, that opens the door for him to return to appreciating the serenity and the beauty and even the alienness of this world outside the flimsy little bubble keeping him safe. And it's not that that takes away his fear of death or his fear of the ocean specifically killing him. It's just that he is now able to still appreciate all these other things about this otherworldly part of the planet. This
Yeah. Gives
vital
him
part.
something we all need in that situation, something to think about.
Something to think about and something to appreciate. There's worse ways to go, is what he's thinking. And, that's debatable, honestly, but
I guess it depends on how claustrophobic you are and how afraid of death you are in general.
yeah.
If you're not very afraid of death, I'd say that's a pretty good way to go. If you are, you'd hope for something where you have a lot less forewarning
Yeah.
that it's gonna happen.
You want it to be quick and you don't want to know it's coming, which is realistically a luxury that very few people get, but that's a whole other thing that we can get into with another cycle maybe. But something that I wanted to make sure I did with this, right, by having this sort of juxtaposition of him going, "This is terrifying, but also beautiful," is I wanted again to use that to highlight the mundanity of it all. Just presenting the ocean as it is, both the good and the bad, because it kind of just is.
Terrifying and beautiful, unavoidable but alien, all encompassing but completely apathetic.
And simultaneously completely apart from us and an integral part of our survival and continued existence.
Yeah.
I just really wanted to with this to a lean into the horror more because even though the Swarm has plenty of scary ocean horror moments, it's definitely not the focus of the story.
Yeah. It's like the real ocean horror, just a byproduct of the ocean being the ocean.
But yeah, but also I wanted to strip away the romanticization, right? Because even the Swarm, which is again a very hard sci-fi story, it's based deeply in scientific fact. It still presents the ocean in a very romanticized way, partially because of the Ur being an intelligent personification of the will of the ocean, basically. Even of course, there's no mysticism to it; they're just things that live there.
Yeah, it literally gives the ocean a will and an immune system to enact that will upon humanity.
And yeah, I mean, A Lull in the Sea obviously deeply romanticizes the ocean because it's constantly using it primarily as a vehicle for metaphors.
It is literally all about the romance, both of the ocean and
Yeah,
of the silly band of kids we're following who, are doing their best.
and yeah, I just really I wanted to strip away all that varnish and just be like, this is the ocean. This is what it is. It is vast, it is alien, it is terrifying, and it is beautiful all at the same time. It's simultaneously nothing special and deeply important.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I think the ocean is just one of the strongest examples, especially in real life, of the, kind of, like, stoic but also bipolar idea of something genuinely being everything and nothing at the same time.
Yeah.
It is the ocean is just amazing.
Yeah. It is simultaneously this amazing, incredible thing. It's just a part of life. It's just a part of things. It's there. And I hope that by not romanticizing it so much, right? And just thinking about it as it is, that that makes it easier to pass for people in a lot of ways, that it is just a part of the global natural ecosystem. And because it is just a regular part of things, it is deeply important to it. It is not some crazy other mystical thing. It is a centralized, integral, ordinary part of existence that needs to be protected. Granted, making this a horror story was maybe not the best way to instill feelings of protect the ocean, but you get the idea.
Yeah, I mean,
I I couldn't resist. I
still.
wanted to do horror. I haven't done a horror story in so long.
And, it's like it's one of those things. I think it kinda does a good way of showing the juxtaposition of the horror and the importance that, like, it doesn't matter how scary the ocean is or how alien it is. We both need it and are also killing bits of it over time and damaging the whole thing. And although the ocean is big enough that it definitely has sub ecosystems, the ocean is also still all one single ecosystem despite all those little parts within it.
I mean,
And
everything is
whenever
really.
we hurt whenever we hurt part of the ocean, we are putting the whole of the ocean. I don't think any part of the world is like nearly as subject to the butterfly effect as the ocean is.
I mean, everything is
The-
interconnected, right? Like, no, there,
It
no,
is,
nowhere,
absolutely.
nowhere on Earth is a self-contained ecosystem, and a part of that is because the ocean links everything. And that's why this guy who's in his protective bubble is still at the ocean's mercy, even though he's built a wall of technology around himself to keep himself safe. It still gets him.
Yeah, even the very continents we live on are really not much more than an extra big, extra thick wall. And even
Exactly.
then, they're not a perfect one. Look at the genuine concerns, not just conspiracy theorists, but like actual environmentalists and people who look at things are having that certain states or certain parts of certain countries here and there, if the right ecological events happen, might disconnect and try to float away.
Or just be submerged anyway.
Yeah, or just be completely buried and drowned. Like,
Yeah, like it's easy to forget, but islands have appeared and disappeared in human lifetime. Like not no one alive today is well actually no, some people alive today possibly have with things that are going on around like Iceland and various like islands, Polynesia, anything like that. But
True.
in within humanity's existence, we have definitely seen land masses appear and disappear, land bridges form and then cease to exist. Were like that happening was a big part of humanity's spread across the continents. Krakatoa was a big island that just blew the fuck up and then wasn't there anymore, was replaced by ocean for the most part.
Yeah, and there's a lot of evidence I heard about a while ago that gosh, I can't remember if it was Viking-esque explorers, Nordic explorers or someone else, but that some of, if not the very first people to set foot on America that we know of, from or the continent that became America, North America, like, did it through a land bridge that then disappeared.
Yeah, like that is how humans got to there. It's how humans got to Australia originally too. Our indigenous population were descended from human ancestors or whatever who crossed land bridges from Asia.
Yeah, if you wanna look at it a dark way, you could say we've lost land to the ocean over
I mean,
time,
we
and I don't
have.
know what the math is on how much new land has been created by volcanoes, but it's possible that it could be that we've lost more than we've than has been created.
I mean, I would be inclined to say that. I mean, look at Doggerland. There's this entire area between like England and mainland Europe where it's completely submerged that shows evidence of human civilization having been present there.
That's kinda scary.
Yeah, look it up. It's interesting stuff.
Just like, "Hey, by the way, there used to be more land and there used to be people on it.
And the sea level is
It's
only
gone now.
rising.
It's gone now, they're gone now, and the ocean's getting higher."
Think about that, people.
And don't and nobody out there forget, it's our fault. May not be your fault personally, but it's definitely humanity's fault.
And as the story has proven, we can't beat the ocean.
Can't beat the ocean. Our options are to live with it or not live.
Yeah.
The with it part doesn't change, just the live part.
Yeah.
That's what we need to focus on.
Damn right. To bring it back to the story a bit, like, and actually talk about the writing a little bit beyond just getting into all the ocean theme stuff, I will say I am
Mm,
happy with it. Like, it's a solid story, but I do think I could have done better. Like, I think I could have emphasized the horror this guy is going through a lot more and made it a lot more impactful than I did with some different like language choices, a bit more like getting his inner monologue, inner dialogue a bit. No, monologue was right. Inner monologue a bit more, things like that. But I think the biggest mistake I made in writing this story was writing it in past tense.
perhaps it's definitely a little bit out of place and disconnected for us to be hearing in past tense, first person about how this guy very likely died.
Yeah, because it either invites like the supernatural into it by having it into what was supposed to be a very mundane story by making it seem like a dead man is telling you his story, which is not at all what you want when you're trying to emphasize the mundane, ordinary nature of the ocean and the regular, ordinary horrors of it, or it undercuts the horrors by making it seem like he survived.
Yeah, like he just lived and we weren't told.
But I sort of got to the end of this the other day and didn't think too much of it. I was like, yeah, this is a solid story. Is it my best work? No, but it's decent and it's gonna hit the right people the right way. And then this morning, when I had no time to go back and edit it all to make it present tense instead, I was like, shit.
Yeah, yeah, that second look always hits with something that, like, brought no thoughts in the moment, only to be like, "Huh, that's a little bit there's, like, tiny little incoherent pieces here now that I think about it."
Yeah, so just a little thing for any writers in the audience. I know there's at least a couple. Tense can matter a lot more than you think it does. Even if you like default to a specific kind of tense, like I generally default to past tense, and I think most people generally default to past tense, to be honest.
I believe it's the default way of presenting stories for the most part.
always worth considering how the way you present the story may accidentally undercut it or change the way it presents itself.
Yeah, because something that affects how people perceive a story, funny enough, even without us thinking about it, I think it's very much for the most part a subconscious feeling. But there's always going to be at least one part of how we feel about a story or how we think about it that's affected by the idea of how am I hearing about this? Hold on. Because, like, a lot of times the reason we don't think about it is because, well, if you're reading a book, it's a book. Someone wrote it down. And obviously, by being a story, this is also literally something you wrote down, but it's not something this guy could have written down if he died.
Yeah, it's just one of those little things where it's like, if you know, you know, if you don't, you don't, sort of thing. But the way you choose to tell your story can vastly recontextualize things, even if you don't want it to. And I really, really wish I'd written this one in present tense the more I think about it.
Yeah, it would have either required that or at the very least, like, it would also make it a little
I mean, you could
a
make it a
little
journal
better.
entry or something, but I didn't, so
Well, I was just gonna say you could also just make it third person, but even though that would ease a little bit of the disconnect, it wouldn't change the part where that's not where that would still damage the mundanity of it all a little bit, because then we're just hearing about it as if it was a story being beamed to our brains.
yeah. But that's my own personal criticism of this one. Any thoughts, positive and or negative, that you wanted to share on this one? Since I always make sure to give you the chance to do so.
Um, Trying to remember. I had a small one I was thinking of before we started talking about that. And now I'm having a hard time remembering. I'm a goldfish, you see. My thoughts and memories don't stick around. Um, oh, no, I think mainly I was just gonna elaborate on the thing you said. I don't necessarily think the story needed to be longer, but I think for the most part, other than what we just talked about, the only ways you could have improved it really would involve throwing in a little bit more detail here and there. But like you said, specifically about about the little circle of fear he went through before coming back to acceptance, like kind of the way I imagine it, if you wanted to put more detail and spread it would be, I think, kind of back and forthing as if we were bouncing around between him processing his fear in a little bit more detail and also him staring out that window into the scary darkness or thinking about parts of the ocean as he's trying to rationalize and just becoming more and more scared going through the thoughts that make his little pebble path towards accepting his fate.
Yeah, like it's a fine story. It's not bad by any means, but it definitely could have been better. It's one of those ones where I look at and I'm like, I would like to, if I can find the time when before we put like I post just a story on its own up on the site, things like that. I wouldn't mind if I can manage to sit down and revisit it and tweak it a bit to change some of those things that I would have liked to make different, like change it to present tense, emphasize the like his personal experience a bit more with the horrors of it instead of just make it a very passive, just move through the story kind of deal. But I mean, I'm not going to commit to it because I'm working on so many things. Like even knowing that this won't come out until a couple months after recording this. I'm like, I know what my schedule is like, and I'm like, if I can find the time and the energy, I'll do it. But I'm making no promises.
Yeah, I mean, that's how it is, but I mean, that's fine anyways, because I think that's a part of why short stories are such good writing exercises and practices, because it truly serves as a microcosm of the whole writing experience in that when there are things you could do better or mistakes you make or whatever, they happen a lot faster. So for one thing, It's less something to feel bad about. Not that people should feel bad about making mistakes in writing in general, but it's a little easier to be like, "Oh, damn, I
Yeah.
didn't see that in time, and now it's done." But also, it's it's way easier to notice that stuff and way easier to roll it in, recognize it, think about why, and go it moving forward. Simply by virtue of there being so much less content to sift through, so much more to think about, or so much less to go on and think about. Like, because in a way, when you're trying to critique a bigger, longer piece, most of what you can critique is how you made it feel or how it made you feel and the individual small moments here and there that stood out to you enough to make sure you remember them throughout the whole thing, even if they were in the middle or whatever,
Yeah.
and not at the end. And those restrictions don't apply to a short story because the whole thing is there right in front of you. I guess what I'm saying is I kind of feel like in a long form story, for the purposes of criticism at least, every bit that's not either stand out good or stand out bad is in a way dead air for the purposes of criticism. There's long stretches of, yep, I have nothing to criticize about that part.
Yeah.
Um,
I get it.
whereas you never have to worry about that kind of dead air or I have nothing to say about this in a
Well,
short
yeah, whilst in
story.
a short story, you don't want that quotation mark dead air because it's a short story. Every moment, kind of, you want to have a pretty strong impact. So I get it.
Yeah, and by virtue of the medium, it's also just more inherently more likely to be like that anyways, which makes the stuff you wanna change or improve on immediately more obvious and easy to, like, identify and quantify, I guess is what I mean.
Yeah, true enough. I do get where you're coming from for sure. On that note though, like it's a bit of a shorter episode, but it's a pretty short story. There's not that much to break down, so we can probably leave this one.
Yeah, it was a good I liked reading it, I liked talking about it, and apparently the ocean is another one of the topics we can also just talk about forever. I enjoyed just the talking about the ocean again too.
Yeah. Honestly, I'm surprised by how much I've enjoyed just the segments where we kind of derail and just talk about the science and mysticism, both of the ocean a little bit. It's been good conversation. But yeah, we'll leave that then. So if you guys are listening to this elsewhere, you can always find these podcast episodes on my website, radfordwrites.com as well. You'll also be able to find additional podcast content there, as well as stories, including those like this one that I write for the podcasts, blogs, articles, that sort of things, and links to buy my books, which always appreciate that support. Additionally, you can find John as Sephir on Twitch and on YouTube. That is Sephear. You should go and enjoy his content because he is entertaining.
I like entertain, like to entertain.
That's good enough for me. Bye, guys.